So I'll keep my intro really short. I like to say I'm a born and bred network engineer by trade. I spent 12, 13 plus years doing networking, traditional routing, switching, wireless security, that sort of thing. As a network engineer, spent time at Cisco, Presidio, really in a variety of roles, from doing deployments to doing technical architecture and pre-sales, really got a good cross-section of what was happening in the industry, right? Let's say, the 2000s, 2013 and 14, I started to make that transition myself into, say what all this means, why we're here today around network automation, programmability, APIs, and how do we make sense of this? And more recently, I was lucky enough to work with Matt, also up here, as a co-author of this great book on the right-hand side. Now, I think when we started writing that, it was the only book out there in network automation. Now there's actually quite a few, which is awesome for the community and the industry. But I think myself and I think Matt, we're a little biased. We think it's a great book to get started with network automation, for what it's worth. And so the past six years, I spent a lot of time really advocating and evangelizing around network automation, really predating to my time at Presidio, my last employer, around exploring what was possible. Right? It was pretty obvious early on in my journey that things could be changing drastically as we look forward with how networks are managed and operated. Right? Oftentimes, a lot of folks were getting hung up around things like speeds and feeds, and really the subtle point was operations hasn't changed, right, since the past 20, 25 years. And it's really, arguably still the case today. And that did lead me to start a company called Network to Code. And that's, we're co-presenting here in Las Vegas. So a quick 30 seconds on us. We are a company fully dedicated to network automation, right? Training, consulting, it's sort of, all we do, right? A lot of folks out there might kind of get spread thin around cloud and development, cloud automation, things like that. Our sole focus is really understanding the intricate details of networking and automating networks, helping our clients do that, right, through a combination of training and professional services. Okay. So that said, we're here for the next 2 days to talk about what it's like to have automated network operations. Now, does that mean we can just take a step back in a couple of years and we're going to have robots sitting next to us or replacing us where you sit day to day? So before we dive in and kind of cover the agenda for the next 2 days, I do want to take a quick audience poll on 3 questions to kind of get a good feel for the folks in the room. Just show of hands, the folks in the room, does anybody have a formal strategy around network automation? Okay, so it's smaller percentage. And how about folks in the room have deployed some form of automation into production? All right, so a lot more there, right? So I guess we have a lot of ad hoc scripts and things like that, which is a great start. And what about open source? Is our folks using open source in their automation strategy? Okay, cool. Yeah, a good number there. This is also a subtle detail when we look at the past couple of years and the path forward. Right, really the intersection of networking and open source it's still fairly new, right? Knowing what to deploy, how to get proper support, right, in these models. But that's good. So we have, it looks like, good cross-section of folks that have strategies. A lot more have deployed into production. So I think we'll get a lot out of these 2 days so you can see a lot of the journeys where a lot of the speakers have gone on tomorrow. Right? We're going to kind of talk through, some of those journeys to deploy a proper strategy. So a quick look at the schedule for the next 2 days. So I'm going to speak for the next 20 minutes or so. Then we're going to go into some live demos from peers of mine, like Darren and Jared coming up to go over some slick demos around just kind of highlighting what's possible. As we start the next 2 days, we kind of want to really show firsthand what's possible. Our 10:45 actually can't make it, so Ritesh is not going to be here this morning. So we have a 15-minute slot if there's any audience member that would want to talk, we can do a 5 or 10-minute talk. If not, you might get me again for a few minutes, which could be worse, I guess. But if anybody has it could be a question, it could be just a general deployment practice they've entertained over the past couple of years. Right, a lot of the hands that went up, talk through maybe some of those early win scripts that have been deployed. So if you do want to chat today or come up here and talk at 10:45, then my email will be on the next couple slides. So we'll kind of just shoot me a note and we'll make that happen. Then we'll go into some principles of automation, right? Very critical for a solid strategy going forward. So Jeremy will talk through that. We'll break for lunch, then we're going to go into really NRE labs that Matt also has been spearheading over at Juniper, a great open source and open community way to build open training content, leveraging open source platforms. So really cool things there. We'll look at Jason Bell will come up and talk through some of the fundamentals to be aware of getting started, things like data structures, data models, APIs, and really making sense of a lot of these newer terms and acronyms. And then we'll have Ajay, Sam couldn't make it from Red Hat, talking about scaling Ansible. Ansible's been pretty popular in the past 2 to 3 years, so to kind of talk through some of the nuances of really optimizing Ansible for production deployments. Okay. And then we have Samir from IntentionNet. Again, a great talk that's going to be around looking at testing. Very often overlooked, right? How do we do some pre-deployment validation testing for networking from a show run? Right? You can literally take the number of show runs and start to predict what would happen. Right? Would peers come up? Would routes be shown? Just with a show run. So it's a great getting started point for network automation. And then Hank from Cisco will close it down. Right? We're going to dive into NetDevOps late in the day. And today's theme is just really about level setting, providing education, talking through some of the terms of technology that often come to fruition in conversations around network automation. And day 2, we have, again, a great number of speakers lined up. The theme for day 2 is really around folks that are leading the charge, doing deployments day to day, right? So we're going to talk to folks. We're going to start with tomorrow, Jeremy Stresh, Sean Anderson, done a ton of work around NetBox, right, from DigitalOcean. Jeremy is the core author and maintainer of NetBox, and talk through what does it even mean to have a source of truth, right, for network automation. What is the value of data, and how does data fit into a network automation strategy? John will stay up here to do a short talk around TTP, right, some great production-grade deployments, leveraging sources of truth and different tools, even like a Stackstorm, to do some combination of ZTP across vendors, kind of think differently about deploying a specific solution for a vendor, always be thinking about how that would apply to various types of devices. Then we'll talk about a couple of journeys. Right? Matt Davey has been around for a long time, and he really led the charge dating back to probably 2010 or so in the world of SDN. He had some of the original production-grade OpenFlow deployments within academia at Indiana University. And he's still doing great things with network automation. Then we'll go into Jeremy Shulman. He's been around for years, and one of the pioneers in this space, leading the charge years ago at Juniper, at Abstra, and now doing some really good things at Major League Baseball. And he'll showcase some of the chat functionalities possible with really adapting to the user base and leveraging self-service functionality in Slack to produce good quality network automation. And Damien, again, another person that's been around and presented quite a bit recently around Roblox's strategy. That's the biggest thing, right? Not many hands went up for having a solid strategy. And it's these types of presentations that we kind of get a lot of that output and feedback to kind of see what it was like to go from zero, right? Get Damien going to Roblox 18 months ago, kind of see that kind of journey. We'll hear directly from him then. Claudia will come up and talk through, as a Unity consultant, how can you leverage just enough automation to be productive? It's not about potentially having that 5-year strategy right now, but you do want to have that path forward and know that how to apply some quick wins to some of your changes that are coming up. Then we'll have Nick Francisco come up. Nick's doing great work in the community, and he supported some large bureaucratic governments. So he's going to talk through some different use cases that he's used to apply network automation to government. And we'll close tomorrow with a pretty solid panel, really an Ask Me Anything panel, right? A lot of the folks up here mentioned Matt, Nick, and Ken already. Kirk Biles will join the panel, right? Very well-known author of NetMeco and put on for network engineers training, very popular with the network automation space. Okay, cool. So this was just for tomorrow, but again, we have that one slide at 10:45. If there's any takers, email me immediately. And this could be just pontificating, this could be speculation, it could be saying network automation sucks and doesn't make sense to entertain. I don't think we'll have any of those thoughts in here, hopefully not. But seriously, if you do want to have a short talk, 5-10 minutes, we have it open slot 10:45. Otherwise, like I said, you may end up with 10 minutes. Okay. So we have one today, and then likely one or two tomorrow. Again, these are short, kind of lightning talks. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do now for the next few minutes is kind of look at where we are. Right? So for the next 15 minutes or so, talk about the state of the industry. Referring to network automation, so where are we? Where do we come from? And where are we going? This path had started really several years ago. So this is a slide that I used at Interop in 2014. So it's kind of funny. As I was building the deck for this small session, I could have literally presented the same exact deck that I did over 5 years ago. And honestly, no one would know the difference of what year it was. And it's kind of the same thing around the CLI, right? The CLI hasn't changed in 25 years. Now, in the past 5 years, the deck, what may have changed is code quality may have been a little bit better from the slide I had shown 5 years ago. I hope. But the key is manual network operations still dominate. And 5 years ago, we're talking about sort of speculating that look, the military has drones overseas being controlled by us here. There's self-driving cars and things like this. And we're still managing devices and we'll say fabrics, if you will. This is the point I want to look at is it's not just about a CLI when you talk about automating a network. And it was either this Interop deck in 2014 or the one before that kind of talked through, at the time, controllers were emerging and popular ones like Cisco ACI and VMware NSX. And it was kind of like an either or. Automate a network or deploy a controller. And arguably, it's actually more error prone to have a controller because you're clicking in a GUI so much. You're not just going to copy and paste commands from a notepad file. Right? So this is really not just about CLI, it's the migration to understanding workflows, automating workflows, and really eliminating manual touch points in the network, if that's typing commands or. So this is the last slide I'll show from 5 years ago. I always love this one. The original slide was actually 2012 for this, which is crazy that we're already 7 years past. Big Switch created this slide 7 years ago, and we used to talk about the biggest change in network operations. This was from '94 to 2014. Was migrating Telnet SSH. Now things are getting better. Right? Now, I actually think the folks in this room are undertaking, the biggest transformation that we're probably going to see in our careers. So I don't think it's fair to say that we're still in the same spot we were five years realistically, because there's been a lot of progress made, and so maybe that was a huge industry shift for migrating protocols. Right? There's a lot of devices to disable Telnet on SSH that took years. Right? We had thousands of devices in the environment, but literally this shift, we talk about automation and APIs and what that means for operations, is really a bigger shift than anything else that we're seeing. Right? You can learn new products and deploy fabrics and things like that, but how you operate a network, we're still very, very early on, even though this started many years ago. Okay? So what I want to do is kind of take a look back through, I would say what I view as personal and industry highlight. So, again, this is subjective, in my opinion, on how we got to where we are. And in 2010, I started a lot of research around OpenFlow and SDN, trying to see what was going to happen in the industry. And for a little bit, I got hung up on this control plane and data plane separation. And so did a lot of vendors. There's a lot of back and forth on trying to figure out how OpenFlow could play a part in strategy. I saw commercial products that never came to fruition around BYOD that were going to leverage OpenFlow in the network, and it really didn't go anywhere. Now, I credit a lot of where we are to Martin Casado, who founded Nicere, which became NSX, who created OpenFlow, but largely because it exposed not just network path forwarding could be different, and there could be software-based networking solutions, but it really exposed there wasn't a good API interface, there wasn't a good way for machines to communicate to networking devices. Right, the CLI was built for us humans. So credit Martin for a lot of what's happened within the data center policy and SDN space, but also around why we're here today. And around the same time, we had Timmy, powered by Cisco. So these solutions in particular, so we still talk about in the realm of SDN or network automation. But the truth is, even these platforms like them are in the data center. And so we still have many more networks to consider. We start looking at automation strategies. We still want to automate these networks and WAN networks and DMZ networks and branch networks. And there's just a lot of different networks that we want to automate. And we kind of had these early years of exposing that management was an issue. Okay. And again, this is credit to Matt Davey, who's going to speak tomorrow. Right. Back then, it was developing production-grade OpenFlow solutions, which is very, very rare, and still rare to this day. And so I'm going to make a few credits to Cisco, right? And to a certain extent, you can argue, late to the game, but there was these subtle points that were happening. And so Cisco had to release something called 1PK in 2012 or 13. And where I was working, we had the opportunity to play with this SDK at the time. Honestly, I hadn't done much development work at all. Heard about iPhone SDKs, Android SDKs, and things like that. But Cisco had an SDK. This allowed us to program against the switch. And it was trying to go maybe too fast, right? It supported C, Java, Python APIs across routers, switches, XE, XR, various OSs, and it just became very complex compatibility matrix, right? So it didn't really go very far. It might have been around for a year and a half, 2 years, but it really showed what was possible. At least for me, kind of showed those aha moments to say, look, something is actually here. We start to combine software development, even DevOps to a certain extent at the time, and network infrastructure. Shortly after, the next year or so, Cisco acquired a company called TLF, right? This company became what's now Cisco NSO. Right. At the time, they were a small company based out of Sweden. They just got a big deal with AT&T back then. But even now, product aside, it's really what brought industry visibility to things like Yang, data modeling in general, even service models. Right. Things like this were happening already in companies like Juniper, but it was this acquisition that really brought it to light. Right. So it was never marketed across the industry. Right. There were some key niche solutions being developed. This acquisition really kind of brought to light the impact of models, right, and so forth. And one thing I wanted to talk about next for a quick second, this is sort of a personal story of mine, that 2014, before I left Presidio, I actually brokered, I believe the first call was between Ansible and Cisco. And it was interesting, right? It was with the founder of Ansible, and it was with the BU and Cisco that was owning network management, or really the 1PK team. And at the time, Ansible was pretty adamant they weren't going to develop any networking integrations. And so there's just too many vendors, too many CLIs, protocols, connection mechanisms, connection setup, netconf, all these things that just weren't going to work within Ansible. So on the call, I worked for a large VAR, and Ansible said, we're not doing it. Cisco couldn't do it because if they do it for one tool, they have to do it for the others, Puppet, Chef, Salt, Ansible. And so they looked at me, and it was like sort of so interesting to see early on that like, there was sort of like a stance, but the value was so apparent once you saw a demo. So, and as we know today, fast forward 5 years, there's obviously they made a lot of good hires at Ansible, and they have a lot of integrations for networks. And things changed, pretty drastically. But I'll credit this next section to what I truly believe is the foundation of why we're here today around some of the open source projects that emerged in a few year spans. Really within probably 18 months, we had official releases of things with NetMiko. Right? Kirk's going to be here tomorrow on a panel. Right? Kirk released a NetMiko. Right? Juniper, credit to Jeremy in the audience, to developing arguably the first solid library to control networking devices, and Ansible modules for Junos, and Napalm was released, very popular. Right now, David Rosso couldn't be here this week. And DC Ansible, PyAPI. These are a couple projects that I really do credit, and the community sort of started this movement, right? And a lot of these somehow ended up, as an example, integrated to tools like Salt and Ansible, and really like vendors, right? Even including the big ones, Juniper, Arista, and Cisco, like saw the community getting behind a lot of this type of community, really pulling the vendors along. I remember being on so many calls in the past couple of years, dating back 15, 16, 17, and it just wasn't apparent yet, like what it wasn't apparent on how APIs could truly change operations. Right? Instead of saying we have an API, here now we're showing what's possible. But this is sort of a few key highlights that I really look at to see how we got to be where we are. So this is 2015. Kind of fast forward, next thing you know, open source really accelerated the market, right? So many libraries, right? A lot of the authors here this week of many of these, right? We have libraries from vendors. Every vendor has APIs and libraries, and there's technology that we have to learn. It's really the snowball effect. Once you kind of dive into automation, you end up learning so many different things around how do you create a dev environment, how do you manage this in production, how do you learn resource control, right? In addition to just being blown away by all of the products and tools and technologies that have been built over the past couple of years. So now we're at this point in time, open source accelerating the market, where products are being built from vendors on here, if it's Cisco, Cloudware, NSO, NetIce, Potential, right? A lot of companies also emerged, right, the past several years. So now we're left with several themes. Right, so a lot of these themes are kind of common points, common questions we get asked all the time, working with customers, and I don't want to call it a buzzword per se, but intent-based networking. How could you deploy intent-based networking in the campus, or how could you deploy it in the data center, or for firewalls? Or how do you develop architectures that account for all of this? And should network engineers program? Should they become a software engineer? Should they download code? Should they write scripts? Should they write playbooks? Right, all these things, data models. Is it even important to those that are starting down the path of network automation? So in the next 2 days, a lot of the speakers will cover a lot of these points. And if there are questions that you have not getting addressed, definitely, again, always feel free to email them in too, and we try to cover them on the panel tomorrow as well as we close the day. So a few final slides I want to look at on some industry standard type of hypercycle charge from Gartner. Right, so here, the bottom left, technology trigger we have. Right, I think it's common for those, especially known for those in the room. We have a trigger, right? We're exploring automation, deploying automation, but it's interesting on the viewpoint on the top, the peak of the inflated expectations. Right, I remember looking at this chart for SDN, right, years ago, and it was like SDN was going to solve everything, and network automation is a little bit different because anything is possible. Right, we ask all the time after a demo of network automation, well, can you automate this? Can you automate that? Absolutely. It doesn't even matter what, if you can write it on paper, it can be automated in some capacity. Now, I think the real expectation that is not set properly is that it's easy, right? Now, to say we we get told all the time that the team of network engineers are automating the network, but their day jobs haven't changed at all. We've seen a team of folks saying, if the team of 5, one person cannot allocate 10% of the time to network automation, another person 20% of their time, one person 80%. And maybe the aggregate output is there, but if you're given 4 hours a week to automate, like literally, you can go nowhere. Like you can have a very, very long path to a journey. So it's really time, money, it's personnel, it's all these things. And the reality is, network automation will slow things down initially, right? If you want to automate, it's not going to be a button that you press and start automating, right? If you've been doing your network engineering jobs, a lot of folks in here could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and it's realizing that maybe it's not as long to automate, right? Because solutions will become a bit better and packaged a bit more, but it'll take time, right? And that's the biggest hype cycle wise. It's really that existing teams can't just own this without a change in their day to day. One more slide. Again, I mentioned Martin Casado from Nicer at VMware, and now venture capitalists. And he talked a lot about crossing the chasm for NSX. NSX was almost there to make network virtualization, and we'll say now, call data center fabrics, commonplace. And so post-acquisition, they still consider themselves pre-chasm at VMware. So VMware acquired Nicer, now they're trying to sell NSX. And it was so hard because no one really understood the problem yet, right? It was, was there a problem in the data center for networking? Do we need overlays between hypervisors? And part of it was understanding that, which takes a lot of time to educate the market. And so when I look at a slide like this and look at where the market is, kind of put some dates here. I think 5 years ago probably was the early adopters, sort of innovators, right? Some of the projects we mentioned earlier on, 2014 and 15, kind of really laying the groundwork to show what's possible to attract some early adopters. So now I'd probably say we're still probably in that chasm somewhere, maybe just slightly on the left side of that chasm. But we are getting close to have things easier to consume, easier to deploy. Right? There's still a lot of interest around infrastructure as code and DevOps, what that means for networking. But things are getting clearer and clearer by the day. And we're going to hear from a lot of folks in the next 2 days the work that's been done to really make that barrier easier for everyone to obtain. But I'd argue that even at a company like Nicer at VMware, or any manufacturer, that it's easier to get product adoption than have solution integration. Right now, when we look at network automation, you might deploy a tool and it can do good things day one, maybe sending commands to a device. But ultimately, you want to have integrations to, it could be ticket systems, chat systems, CMDBs, IPAM systems. And all of those integrations take time. So I think we're kind of at that chasm of understanding the problem, developing architecture, but deployments are going to take a long time. Right? When you really can get to that, we'll call it highly optimized automated network, it'll just take time because the shift that we're in is way different and, again, I'll argue way more complex than deploying any single product that exists out there. Okay, cool. So that was just a good opening for what we have to come in the next 2 days. It's 9:33, not too bad, only 3 minutes over. And so let's get on with it. I'm gonna shut down here. I'm gonna invite up Jared, Darren, and then we're gonna start with some demos to see what's possible with network automation.